Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. Thank you all for coming. So this is a great crowd on a beautiful day. The guys, I think, are done leaf blowing out there, so hopefully that won't distract us from learning this morning. I just wanted to introduce our speaker and myself. I'm John Mangiarotti. I'm the town manager. I've been here for about 5 years, and it's a great community to work in. And I'm excited to see members of the Acton community here and members of communities nearby as well, Boxborough, Concord, and who knows who else. But it's nice to see so many people here to learn about this important topic. The governor's office announced earlier this month, or I guess last month, that they've nearly reached capacity for the shelter system in Massachusetts. And so that's something that's an ongoing thing. More than 85 communities across the Commonwealth have hosted emergency shelters in their communities, usually at old motels or housing of that sort. Concord, our neighbors, had a... No, that's just for those guys. That's not for us. Concord has had a shelter in its community for just under a year. And so we've learned a lot from them. And we found out earlier this fall that the Minuteman Inn, which used to be the Concordian on Route 2, is going to be hosting families as an emergency shelter. It's a motel. You're all familiar with it. There's a few buildings. The front building will remain the way it is, and the back building will be the emergency shelter. So we are a welcoming community. We try to welcome everybody, people that have been here for a long time, people that are here as an emergency. As part of that, we wanted to learn more about some of the people that may be coming here. And we have an expert, Martise, who's going to talk a lot about that this morning. And I just wanted to, Wanjiko will welcome her, and I wanted to first introduce Wanjiko. Wanjiko Gashuhe is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the town of Acton. She started here 8 months ago.
Yes.
And she's been working very hard, and this is one of the many things that she's brought to the community in partnership with Laura Ducharme, who you all know, our Community Resources Officer. Wanjiko?
Good morning, everyone. Please help yourself to some coffee and some pastries. So the DEI office is always working towards developing nurturing, inclusive, equitable, and diverse programs and workshops to foster our community's growth. This workshop is one such program, and we are honored to have Martise here, and we will continue to create workshops that are welcoming to not only migrants, but to the Acton population. So thank you so much. Martise Morris is a licensed independent clinical social worker and public health professional with over 20 years of experience in primary care and mental health. She is the founder of Perspectives Health Services, a virtual behavioral health organization that was established in 2015 to offer culturally informed and linguistically appropriate services for communities of color. Martise's clinical work focuses on families, cultural identity, issues related to migration, related to stress and acculturation, and the relationship between mental health disorders and physical health conditions. Martise has spent decades working with Haitian communities in Boston as well as Miami, and we're glad to have her.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So before I get started, I usually like to know who the participants are that are attending this workshop or any workshop I do. So if we can take a few minutes and go around the room and you can tell me which sector or agency that you're with, that'll be great as I do the presentation to keep that in mind about the specific sectors that you work in. So we can start with this side of the room. You want to go this way?
Susan Heilman, Discovery Museum. Joe Fisher, South Acton Church, involved with the interfaith community settling refugees.
Oh, great.
Rob Slattery, Operations Manager, Open Table Inc., another food pantry
Good morning.
Staff, coordinator SCL and mental behavioral health for the Acton Public Schools. I'm Casey Taylor. I'm from Advocates for the Global Crisis Team that covers this catchment area for psychiatric emergencies. Fran Arsenal, I'm on the Acton Select Board.
David Martin, I'm also on the Acton.
Okay.
Monica Giubaxi, I'm the Acton Police Department, police officer.
Okay.
Beth Dana, social worker with the Acton Police.
Oh, great.
Chris Hodges with the Acton PD.
Good morning, Lead Arm, Fire Chief of Acton.
Ed Mullen, Building Commissioner, Town of Acton.
Okay.
Wendy Trins, Foxborough Community Services.
Jim McCray, Veteran Services for Acton and Loughborough.
Okay. We can start in the back and then go up.
Christina Gutierrez, the executive on behalf of our program called the Daily Success Partnership. Giselle Smith, I'm the resource coordinator. Kathy Glazer with the Town of Acton Nursing Service.
Okay.
Amanda Eldridge, I'm the resident services of Acton.
We can start at the end.
Debbie Warburg, the Director of First Connections, here in Acton, serving families with young children.
Okay.
I'm Jenny Duncan, I work with Deb as an early learning specialist.
Okay.
Jill Sequeiros, Program Manager at the Table, Food Security. From UC Acton Booksmore United Way.
CJ Carroll, Principal Assessor at Acton. Dan Sorrell, Director of Public Health and Building.
Great.
Hi, Todd Shook, I'm the Council Chairperson at the high school.
I'm Marissa Anderson, I'm one of the school adjustment counselors at the high school.
Jim Snyder Grant, Acton Select Board.
Okay.
Dean Trotter, Acton Select Board.
Andrea Becerra with the Town of Acton Sustainability Office. Alyssa Nickel, I'm on the Acton Select Board and I'm also working as a classroom assistant at Miriam.
Okay.
Maria Palacio, Library Director here in Acton.
Pajan Bartley, Library Director at Foxborough Library.
Okay.
Corey Oak, Public Works.
Okay, great. Wow, we have such a diverse sector here, and I'm so glad that, because I was asking Wanjiko when we spoke about some of the partners and agencies that are here, so it's great to see such a great representation. So this morning, what I'm gonna cover is about my community, the culture I come from. While I was born in Haiti, I was not raised there. I spent the first 8 years of my life there. The rest has been in the US. So I'm coming from a Haitian American perspective, but I've worked with Haitian families, the Haitian population and communities in many different states. And so some of this I'm gonna present to you are from my own work, because there's not a lot of research that is done on this population here in the US and also abroad. So I pull as much as I can from my own kind of experience and also those of my colleagues who work with the population. As I present to you today, I'm doing it from a cultural humble approach, meaning that I'm always learning, even about my own community. And some of the things that I'm going to point out to you are even, new to myself. I'm learning as the new residents, new families are coming, and learning certain things that I thought I knew about that are not what they are, basically, in terms of their experiences and what they're going through. So we can go to the next slide. So basically today I'm hoping to give you an overview of Haitian history, culture, traditions, describe some of the migration experiences and challenges I've learned from my work with some of the new migrants and residents that are coming. We're going to discuss the concept of cultural humility and how to practically kind of apply it across different sectors and different type of work. And then share some recommendations on delivering services from that approach. I usually like to do presentations in a dynamic way, meaning that as I finish each section, if there's questions, I'd like folks to chime in or make statements so that I don't lecture the entire time, and that it's more of a conversation than a lecture. So a brief history about, Haitian, the Haitian historical perspective. So colonial period, basically, Columbus came to the island in 1492, and it was basically populated by indigenous folks who were wiped out when he came. The island basically was one huge island that was referred to as Haiti by the Taino indigenous folks that were there, but then France kind of cut it in half during the Spanish and French wars that was there. So half of the island, that's now Dominican Republic, speaks Spanish. The other half is Haitian, was under French rule for many, many years. And the Haitian Revolution, which brought about Haiti's independence in 1804, also brought with it this kind of burden of having to pay France for getting our own independence. And this lasted up until kind of 21st century that we're still paying back that money. So what that means is that a lot of the investments and things that we could have done with those funds were kind of being given elsewhere, and we were not recognized by a lot of the Western world as an independent entity after that 1804 revolution. We're looking at like the 19th and 20th century. What's been going on in Haiti has been a lot of political instability, a lot of government changes, a lot of external debts, and a lot of migration. So the US had occupied Haiti back in 1915. And if you look at the graph of migration during that period of time, there weren't a lot. So I'd say, 1915, 1930s, a smattering, like around 500. As we came under dictatorship, back in the 50s and 60s, you started to see a rise in migration. And the folks that would migrate were more the professional class, the kind of, socioeconomically higher class would come to the US. And then we moved to the 80s and 90s, then you saw an expansion of more folks from the rural areas and from different parts of Haiti coming to the US. So I went over the Duvalier regime a little bit, and the importance of that regime kind of shaped the way that I know my parents and also grandparents behaved, because there was a lot of suppression of expression, of speech. You could not trust a certain, your neighbors, because they could report you to the Tonton Macoute, which were a paramilitary group, and you would disappear. So there was a lot of distrust of, even family members under that regime because of what they had instituted. And again, a lot of people fled at that time because of that. Post-Duvalier, which was in the 80s when there was a coup, there were a lot of different types of governments or government groups taking, short-lived kind of government establishment, which never kind of put in place some of the infrastructures, some of the programs that were needed to manage a country well. So then immigration continued. We also were struck by an earthquake in 2010, and I'm sure a lot of you, heard about it, which caused migration as well. This time, though, the migration was not just to the US. Folks started to travel to like South America, and I'll talk a little bit about how that presents and what's the impact of that newer migration. And to present day, I'm sure if you follow the news, you'll know there's still a lot of political instability. We're now run by a lot of gangs, a lot of kidnappings. There's a lot of brutality going on top of some of the natural disasters. We get hit by hurricanes a lot. There was a cholera outbreak after the 2010 earthquake from the soldiers that were coming in from different countries, and that devastated the population as well. So I'm going to talk, I don't know if there's any questions about some of the history and why that's important to this discussion about the new migrants coming in. Yes.
So the island's divided in half. Is there migration back and forth at all between the two halves of the island?
Oh, great question. Yes. So the Dominican Republic does take on or have a lot of migration, and there's a lot of anti-Haitian sentiment. I would compare it to almost like here in the border states with Mexico. Recently, the Dominican Republic has revoked citizenship for Haitian children or folks who were born there, who would be regarded as, Dominicans under their law. So they rewrote their constitution, and there's been an ongoing issue about they're building a wall right now, and there's been this kind of back and forth between them. And it's been kind of to put it lightly, a tumultuous relationship, because there was a dictator, Trujillo, who was there and did, yes, thank you. It's a hard word to say. Did commit genocide of the Haitian people there. And there's this kind of relationship, being a close neighbor, and also it was part of, one big island where there basically contentions about resources and how, Haitians are coming in and kind of taking resources that should, quote unquote, belong to Dominicans. So that relationship is pretty fraught, yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned the Taino people were wiped out, and I know that there's still a population. There are some living here in Massachusetts. Are they no longer living in Haiti?
No longer in Haiti, no. Yeah.
You might get to languages a little bit later, but
Yes.
Is it true so Haitian Creole being one of the main languages, or French, that a lot are speaking Spanish as well? And is it possible
Yes.
that that's a bridge language between us and speaking to the Haitians right now?
Great, yes, I will, but great question though, yes. So Portuguese is the other language, because there were a lot of folks that moved to Brazil after the 2010 earthquake and settled there and had families, but we'll cover that too, yeah. And the difference between Haitian Creole and French, we'll cover that as well. Yes.
You mentioned the U.S. occupation in the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between the United States and Haiti over time, and particularly the migration patterns?
Oh, great question. Yes. So the relationship, with the U.S. sometimes has been good, sometimes not so great. So you'll notice, or you may be aware that in the 80s, there was a lot of migration going on, Cuba, and folks coming, what they would term, quote unquote, boat people, because they would use boats as opposed to coming in by air or anything like that. So there were a lot of intercessions in the waters that separates Miami, Cuba, and Haiti. What took place, basically, most Cubans were, given access to come to the U.S., or there were laws that kind of protect that kind of migration. It was way later that there were that kind of legislation for Haitians. Usually they were turned back, or they were put on Guantanamo and had, to stay there and be cleared there or imprisoned, as opposed to being able to get access here. So till this day, there were a lot of Haitian families that are being turned back to Haiti. Some of them did not come from Haiti. Some of them have made lives elsewhere and haven't been to Haiti for, ages, and now have been just dropped there to Haiti. There is some research or some work about the rise in gang violence that we're seeing there being tied to some of the folks that are in prison here in the US. If you're not a US citizen and you have some kind of criminal record, usually they send you back to your country of origin. So some of the folks that are causing some of the gang problems there are some of them are linked to that, in addition to the upper class wanting certain powers and using gangs as a way to get that. Yeah. Any other questions? Great questions. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Haitian culture, traditions, and values. Again, this is fluid. It changes because as migration takes place and people are dispersed and move to other regions, some of those traditions that they try to hold to sometimes get diluted and integrated with other traditions that they're finding and where they're going. So what I'm talking about, when I talk about Haitian culture and traditions, I'm referring to what took place, in Haiti and how we view things. Some of it may not apply to the current groups that are coming who have lived in South America and other places as well. So collectivist nature of Haitian society. So basically what this means is that we see ourselves not as individuals, but as part of a group, whether that's family or a part of a neighborhood or a part of a region in Haiti. That collectivist mindset is how we usually operate, meaning that individual achievement is not as prized as how you use that achievement to help the collective, to help the others that are, sometimes left behind in Haiti, or your family that may need your assistance. It tends to be a patriarchal system, but you'll see in parentheses I have economics, decision-making, and that sort of thing, but matriarchal in regards to child rearing and households and things like that. So you'll see there are a lot of female-headed, households and families in that sense. Family roles and organization. The nuclear family doesn't quite apply. Sometimes, yes, there are nuclear families, but families is basically described as anyone who's in your household, and that may be an uncle or an aunt. Grandmothers are and grandparents are huge in the family system. Extended families are part of that system and unit as well. Children are often viewed to be or are raised to be respectful of elders. You can see that most children, when you talk to them, will not look you in the eyes because you're not supposed to look at adults in the eyes, and always respond yes to questions that are being asked, and being acquiescent to adults and authority figures. The elders in the family, as I mentioned, are usually grandparents or a great uncle or an aunt. And they are usually the ones that help with child rearing. So in a family, you might have, the parents or a parent, and the grandmother or grandfather is the one that looks after them when the parent has to work, or take care of the children when the parent's working. So there's a concept, that's okay. There's a concept of what we call quartier en lacu, which basically is, in Haiti, usually homes are built around this courtyard system, and there are many different families. Those families may not be blood related, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, but this kind of collective courtyard system is where, decisions are made, children are cared for, adults, come together in the afternoon to talk and share information. So it's usually, again, blood and non-blood related, and it's primarily for child rearing purposes where there's an adult eye on that child and is caring for that child. And that means that a person, a neighbor, can discipline your child, and we'll talk about a little bit what discipline looks like and how that may be a challenge here, and how to kind of go about that and address that culturally. Okay. The types of family structure, so there are cohabitating families, again, meaning that folks who may be blood-related but are extended families, and folks who are family members who are living in one household. So you'll find that a lot, that there are often many family members in one household. Extended family, communal, or co-housing. Just an interesting story. So when my family came here, we lived, in Cambridge. And I want to say for the first 10 years that I was here, there was always people in our homes. So that my mom would open up and my dad would open up our home to new friends or family members or anyone that just came to the US, and they would help them find jobs, go with them to sign up for services, and kind of get them their footing. And then once they're, stabilized, then they would move on. As kids, we didn't like that very much because we often had to give up our rooms and, space. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why I became a social worker. And we'd have to go, interpret and go with them to different places to help them get stabilized. There's a strong expectation, that family members help one another, that you make sacrifices, for your family. One of it is providing financial support to family members here and in in Haiti as well, or wherever they may be. And we can do a deeper dive into how that puts extra strain. If you can imagine how expensive it is living in Massachusetts, and then whatever income you're making, you're either splitting it in half or whatever to send back to family that are in Haiti or may not have access. Many family members finance or used to finance immigration for other members to come here. And again, as I mentioned, they would, provide shelter, job, and employment and all that for the family coming here from Haiti. This slide I'm a little bit ambivalent about. So remittances, does anybody know what remittances, have heard of remittances?
Sending money home to your home country.
Exactly, yep. So this was from the World Bank. This is Haiti's sending remittances back, and it goes to 2018, it was the most recent. So you'll see that, the graph is going up. And it's about, I want to say, almost $3 billion that is sent back, that people are, taking out of their household, sending back. Now, the reason I say I'm ambivalent about this slide is it shows that our values are being put in action, right? That we are actually living that collective approach and that collectivist system. But at the same time, I'm a little concerned about it because I've worked with folks where that's a burden. One of the clients that I remember vividly, I used to work with migrant workers in Maine, and I'd see them for mental health, behavioral health. So there was this one client who was, very big, strong man, and Haitian men do not come for mental health services. So he came and he was really depressed and crying. And as we're talking, he's like, I can't call home because every time I call home, they're expecting me to send something and I hardly have anything here. And I started drinking, he said, because I can't deal with the disappointment in their voices and the way they're viewing me. So while this is, great, but it puts a burden on the folks that are here in the expectation that, oh, you've come to the US or you've traveled abroad, you should be making money enough to help those that are left behind.
Can you say, though, that that's a universal pressure on all immigration groups in America these days?
It is. And the reason I show that graph is because among all the immigration groups, Haitians send back the most. Yeah. And it is a very real pressure, yeah. Oh, did I miss a question? Yeah.
Would you say that the rise in remittance is due to an increased demand in Haiti for remittance to be paid, or would that be from another economic factor?
It's kind of hard to tell. While there's been, kind of steady migration from Haiti and more people are here, that means that more is being sent back. So remember I said that it was really slow moving in terms of the population, right? So the more population here that are working, the more that's being sent back. And Haitian folks, similar to many other, migrant groups, tend to have many jobs and do a lot to kind of uphold the family here and also support those. Again, one of the saddest things when I was doing that project in Maine is folks that were like in their 50s and 60s having to do agricultural labor, right? To be able to build a house in Haiti or send for a cousin or take care of that cousin's education. So there's a lot, and they're having to work longer, and they have all sorts of chronic illnesses. So that pressure about sending money back is really one of the biggest challenges.
The only thing I want to add to that is the fact that I myself, I have my mother in Haiti. I have actually experienced that since the time I got to college. My father stopped assisting me with her, and he basically said that I had to be the one to start assisting her financially, and that is because there is no jobs in Haiti at all. She used to do some type of little business, but then all of a sudden her health started getting in the way. So she became more and more in need of me to assist her with her housing and also making sure that she eats every day. So for somebody who is experiencing that myself, because I'm currently trying to get her to come to the United States right now, so I feel like I should add that in.
Thank you. This is Stefania. She's one of our clinical interns, and she's here. I should have introduced you earlier, sorry. So yes, Stefania hits the point, right on the head in terms of having that kind of responsibility kind of passed on. I did the same thing you did. Right after college, I took care of my grandmother, make sure her housing was paid, but it was, I graduated undergrad in '92 and the economy wasn't so great, but that responsibility, you feel it as something you have to do, having the privilege of living here in the US.
I apologize if this is insensitive in a way, but are they happy coming to the United States? Is it something that they want to leave Haiti? Or are they happy, and like when you're trying to bring family members over, do they want to leave?
That is a wonderful, wonderful, great question, and we can spend a lot of time discussing it, but I will, most people do not want to leave their home. I know when I was 8 and I was kind of forced to leave, I did not want to leave my grandmother and the things I had known and the family and all that. You are kind of looking for better opportunities in education and employment and so on. So you make the choice that you have, in order to feed your family, in order to care for them. But if there were, let me backtrack. There's always this dream, and I'm sure other immigrant groups might share it too, of going back to the home country, right? So that's why they work so hard, build homes in Haiti with the thought, okay, by the time I retire, maybe I can come back, I can go back. My mother's dream for me was to go back and open some kind of primary care and, work there. And I had that same dream too for a very long time. I didn't become a US citizen until my mid kind of 20s because I'm like, oh, we're going back. Right? And a lot of immigrant folks think the same way. We're here to work, we're gonna, build up our financial resources, and then we're gonna go back. But unfortunately, political and other environmental issues can make it really tough. Yeah.
Question about families, the families that are coming, are they being split up? Are kids with their parents? I know it's like looked at as kind of who's with them as their family. But are they with their legal guardians for the most part?
That's a good question. I can only tell you anecdotes. Yes, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. trend that you're seeing, folks coming with their kids, that wasn't how it was before. I want to say, 60s, 70s, 80s. What would happen is that the children would stay with a trusted adult, cared for. The parent would come, or parents, and they would set up, home, stability, and then send for the children. That's what happened to me. And again, if we want to look at this clinically, there's a gap. I think there must have been, my mom left me at 2, so there was like a 7-year gap where I was left and a lot of children were left, and then they have to reunite with that family, and that brings other added pressures as well. But now what we're seeing is that young babies, little children, are being traveled with through these migration routes. So it's not always the blood family that is with the children. It's not always a family member that is with those kids. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a social worker, do you see that this remittance factor is a major driver in people pursuing help with mental health, or the other larger driving factors, for folks pursuing help with those issues?
So mental health is still very much a stigma. We destigmatize it a bit after the 2010 earthquake, because there were a lot of groups from the US and elsewhere going to do psychological first aid. So I was really surprised when I went to Maine and was, doing a focus group with the Haitian migrant workers about telehealth and providing that service. And a lot of people knew what mental health was and was very comfortable with doing telehealth because they had used WhatsApp and to communicate with their families. Are you guys familiar with WhatsApp? Okay. So a lot of the immigrant groups use it, video and text, to communicate back. But back to your questions about mental health, it's still something that my agency and others are trying to bring awareness to the community about. That it's something that needs to be addressed. And we have done project in Brockton with Brockton Police and so on and so forth, because folks were not calling for assistance when they needed it, when a family member had a crisis. And usually the police are the ones that's called, and most Haitian families will not call police officers. So it was doing trainings around that. How do you enlist law enforcement in a way that makes the family doesn't feel like they're kind of sending their loved ones out there and getting them into trouble, per se. Okay, next. Just want to be mindful of time. Spirituality and religion. I think someone mentioned they were from a church. Yes, okay. Having connection with God or spiritual system is really important to many Haitian families. Most of them are Catholic. Others are, Christians. There's different kind of Christian denomination that have been going back and forth to Haiti to kind of spread the word. And they tend to seek kind of assistance, everything from, employment, housing, and so on, through the church or through an affiliation with the church. And you'll hear a lot of the new migrants who have been placed throughout Massachusetts, one of their big complaints is that they don't have access to a church, or a church where they can go and understand, the service, because it is being done, in English. The other religion that is practiced is Vodou. Not a lot of people will admit to that because of the stigma and the way it's been portrayed in Western, in the Western world. Some of the things that have been portrayed in movies and TV is nowhere near what this spiritual and religious practice is. It's a naturalist kind of practice where we honor our ancestors. We use a lot of herbal remedies, alternative care, because that's what most people have access to. The whole primary care system is not well established in Haiti. So then you gotta rely on other forms of healing. And that practice, that spiritualism, that provides a lot of the practice around that. religion, has been found among some of the folks that I've worked with to be like a protective factor. You'll often hear clients say, well, God will handle it, or, it's in God's hands. It's not that they're being defeatist or giving up. It's that their faith and their hope is that things will get better as they, do prayers and attend services and things like that. There is a belief that sometimes, God and their spiritual faith will heal whatever issue, especially around mental health. And that would be a different, kind of workshop we do in talking about how mental health and religion intersect. But for most illnesses that they think is not like physical illness, they think that God or their spiritual kind of practices will bring about healing and cure. And that may be helpful in some ways, but sometimes not so much. So it's knowing kind of when to intervene and when to kind of have them follow the traditional approach. Support systems that a lot of folks use are extended family. That's who they go to. But again, with the new group that's coming here, it's not whole family systems, so they rely on friends or folks that they are considering or have brought in as family figures into that. That kind of system have been, shown to decrease medical illness, depression, and health symptoms, and kind of address some of the stresses with acculturation, being in a new place, and having that kind of support system. So someone had asked about language. I think it was you, right? Yeah. So Haitian Creole versus French. So Haitian Creole is a mixture of the different indigenous and different groups of ethnic folks that were there. So it's African, it's French, it's some of the indigenous languages that makes up Haitian Creole. French, we all know what French is. If a person understands Haitian Creole, it does not mean they understand French, and vice versa. And French is usually tied to more of the, education and higher class. So most people might say, oh yes, I understand French, but may not really to connote a level of education that may or may not be there. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is that some of the newcomers, because of their migration journey, have, speak Spanish fluently really well, or Portuguese, having gone through Brazil. So if there is not someone who speaks Haitian Creole, the person might, be well served by somebody who speaks Spanish or Portuguese. It's finding out what the client's language skill sets are. Education, something we highly, highly value. For the clients that I've worked with, they will often do many jobs to pay for private education, because Haiti education is private. There's not a lot of public, school institutions, and parents are used to paying fees for, books and uniforms and things like that. So when they come to this country, usually they enroll kids in Catholic school or in other kind of private school because they feel that's the best education that they can provide for their kids. And like I said, they'll do 2 or 3 jobs to be able to afford that, because they view education as the road, a road to upward mobility, to getting the family more stabilized financially. Parents usually do not take a big role, as we do here in the US, in schools and education. They see educators as the experts. They provide the child with the basic needs, the uniform, clothing, food. So there is usually a separation between the parent and the school. So what usually happens here and other places is that when the schools are calling and hoping that the parent is going to come to meetings and things like that, and they're not, it's not because they don't care. It's because they think whatever's going on in the school, you as educators will handle. And you'll find a lot of parents, when you meet with them, will say that as well. They expect teachers and school personnel to provide a good education, and any kind of misbehavior that happens in the school will be handled in the school. They don't, think that they necessarily need to interject.
Is there a way to advocate sort of a cultural liaison, if possible, within the town, so that the families realize we have a different way of doing things?
Absolutely.
And that really, the educators, the law enforcement, it's a different mentality. We're here to help other people versus, given their background, they distrust those entities for good reasons. But that here you can drop that and, I just throw it out there as how do we build a bridge.
You've just had the rest of my presentation wrapped up, so I think, yeah. No, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I used to work in Cambridge as a school social worker. I was hired primarily because of my Haitian Creole skills, but there was also someone who was a parent liaison who would have groups with the parents, talk about what's going on in the schools, what the expectations are, and things like that. And one of the recommendations that I will be making and talking a little bit more at length is how do we kind of make parents and the new residents that are going to be coming to Acton more aware of what the expectations are in their new home, to prevent, calls to DCF, to prevent certain issues from, going on, so that they know and can, help one another and understanding what the new expectations are around school, around, the community and law enforcement and so on. Yes?
Is French the main language taught in schools?
It was, but there was a movement to teach Haitian Creole because it's like being bilingual. So somebody who's speaking Creole at home, like 99% of the population, that's what they speak at home. And then you go into a school and it's all French. You're basically learning another language. So in the late 80s or so, there was a movement to teach Creole to make it is one of the official language, but it wasn't kind of written out. It was more of an oral, but now there's a lot of books and a lot of information on written Creole, on the structure, grammar structure, and so on. And most, teachers are being asked to teach Creole in the school as well, but French is still taught.
Do we know if the newly arrived migrants from Haiti are speaking English as well as Haitian Creole, or?
So it's a mixture. You'll find folks who do have some English fluency, some none at all, some with Spanish and Haitian Creole, but depending, how old the new resident migrant is, because kids that were born in Brazil and Dominican Republic, Spanish or Portuguese would be their primary language, and they may have Creole as well, so it depends.
So people coming from Haiti, would most of them understand French for the migrants who are here in the shelters at the moment?
It's not, that assumption does not bear out. Yeah, most, I would say Haitian Creole is definitely more understood. There might be some people who understand French, but it would depend on, the person's language experience and what they're coming with. So I always ask, Parenting, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because that is one of the issues that we sometimes see is around parenting. So children are, viewed as a gift from God. It's expected, that you will have children, that you will raise children. Parents are expected to, put the needs of their children first. And those needs are about, sending them to the best schools they can afford, food, clothing, shelter. There's not a huge emphasis on some of the social emotional kind of aspect that we see in parenting here in the US. But parents feel as, if I meet your basic needs, you're well fed, you have access to school, then my role is kind of done in that way. Most Haitian parents, I would say, use kind of the authoritarian style, which means that they have strict rules the child must follow and obey. You respect your elders, you do what they say. And there's not much room for, asking the child what they want. I was never asked what I wanted as a child. I just did what I was supposed to and follow the rules and try to not get a beating. Children's feelings and thoughts are rarely taken kind of into consideration. And this can sometimes lead to a lot of issues. When I worked in the school system, one of the reasons that I was hired was because of parenting issues. Kids coming in saying, they got, put on their knees, and it's a way of punishment that the child is put on their knees for a certain amount of time because they've done something wrong, or, they've gotten a beating. Usually what I would do is go and talk to the parent, explain what the expectations are, discipline versus punishment, those kind of workshops to let them know that certain parenting approaches are not, done here, and that could land them in trouble. And I know that a lot of the parents that are in the DCF system, so we are a small population overall in the state, but we are like the third largest population in DCF when you look at the numbers in terms of children reports and 51As being filed. And a lot of it has to do with, how we parent, how we do certain things, and what we think that parenting should look like. So I often tell organizations before filing that 51A or calling neglect or anything like that, speak to someone or contact someone who's familiar with the culture, do an intervention approach before that. And then if nothing resolves, then we can continue and seek support from the state. But it should not be the first kind of default way of addressing parenting issues with new immigrants who do not know what the expectations are in parenting here.
Can you talk at all about the father's role? My experience in working with other cultures has been that the father is sort of the top of the pyramid of the home, and then, the women are expected to do all of the really childcare and all of that. And getting to work with families with young children, often I wonder about how can I best support mom and little ones, and then, the family itself.
Right, yeah. So you'll see different kind of family setups. Sometimes there is a father there, sometimes there isn't. And yes, the role of the father is usually at the top of kind of the hierarchy. The women power, I would say, is more in the home with the children, child rearing, and things like that. And they do sometimes make a lot of the financial decisions too. In my role in working, with the Haitian communities to try to involve the fathers, there have been projects and programs where it's fathers only, and what their involvement is, how they can best help with parenting, and kind of doing an informational session about what the expectation is and how they're expected to be more involved in child rearing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we talked a little bit about migration, so I'll skip that one. This slide just tells you a little bit where Haitian migrants are going to. So the US and the Dominican Republic, and then like I mentioned, Chile, Brazil. Canada is another huge one because Canada speaks this French, Montreal, and so on. There's a lot of Haitian population in those areas. And then some of the Caribbean countries, Bahamas, French Guiana, and so on. We touched on this a little bit about the families that are coming here are coming with younger and younger children. Pregnant women as well are coming. There are folks coming speaking multiple languages, working age, so you don't see a lot of elderly folks or seniors doing that grueling migration. It's mainly the folks that are, within the working age, so you're thinking late teens and 30s and so on. And the country of origin, as I mentioned, is not always Haiti. Some of the challenges that the new residents and migrants have faced in their migration journey are some of the things that I've covered. It talked a little bit about the political instability, the gang violence, the natural disasters that kind of, make a family feel they can no longer survive or live in Haiti. And as they do the journey, the discrimination sometimes they face. So there was some recent articles about the experiences of families going to South America, not being allowed to, have jobs or housing or, certain things. And the reason now that they've left South America to come to the US is because of some of those issues, that there is no opportunity there. The exploitation that went on, and somebody had mentioned about separation of families, there are some separation of families, and there's loss, a lot of loss, deaths, and trauma that's been experienced. What we're seeing in our work is the kind of post-migration trauma, the depression, the adjustment disorders, for some of you who are in the clinical world, the stress, and most of that is usually brought on by folks not being stably housed or not being able to work and feeling isolated. So just to share a quick story, one of the interns that's part of our program is working with a pregnant mom. She's here with like a 2-year-old, and she's about to give birth in a few weeks. But she has no family, nobody to leave the 2-year-old with. And what we're trying to find is a way while she's in delivery and in the hospital for a couple of days for somebody who can watch that child and take care of that child while she's there. So she came in with depression, of course, and feeling, really isolated, and a new baby's coming on, which caused further isolation. So those are the kind of issues that we're seeing and trying to address. Mm-hmm.
How are they physically getting to Massachusetts? We're not exactly geographically close to many of these migration points.
Some of them have been, as I'm sure you heard, bused in. Some of them have, are getting and traveling on their own, hearing that, they know someone or knows someone in Massachusetts, so it's different kind of ways. With agricultural workers that come to work, there's a route that starts, in South Florida, and then it goes up to the eastern kind of states. And then when I heard there were Haitians in Maine, it totally blew my mind. I'm like, really? Not knowing that the big blueberry season, the wreaths that we use for Christmas, they're the ones that work in those industries. So, challenges of the families that are in the shelters because they're so spread out. So traditionally, Boston, greater Boston, Cambridge, Mattapan, Hyde Park, Somerville, those areas were kind of the traditional hub where Haitian migrants would settle. But now that they're more spread out, there's limited access to some of those communities and folks who speak Creole. But I'm hoping because we're more virtually connected now, that some of that can be addressed with providers who speak Creole and can provide some assistance. Lack of autonomy with personal and cultural practices. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. The biggest complaint that families and folks who are residing in the shelter are saying is around food. It's not that they don't have access to food, they don't have access to food that they're familiar with or food that they consider nutritious. So parents, moms are feeling like they are not doing the best that they can in caring for their kids because they're feeding them things that they are not familiar with, and the food that they feel like is substantial, they can't cook. Usually they have like a microwave in the room, and that's about it. I think one of my colleagues told me she saw a client last week, and he was like, I haven't had rice and beans in months. And that's a big staple in our diet and our food. So that can usually make someone feel like they're not in charge of themselves, they're not in charge of the family. Going to church, as I mentioned before, is a big one. Most Sundays or Saturdays, if they're Seventh-day Adventists or so on, that's where you'll find a lot of Haitian families. When we want to get the word out, that's who we partner with, our churches. They are not having a lot of access to that. As I mentioned before, depression and anxiety about employment and feeling like they're in limbo. They don't know when they're going to get working papers or when they're going to be moved to a stable kind of place. All that acts on mental health. And a lack of knowledge about their new home and the expectations that are there can sometimes land them in situations that they were not thinking something like that would cause. We did mention about parenting and the last one about overprotectiveness and distrust of the system. Haitian parents are very protective, very overprotective. I know here in the US, we kind of want kids to have friends, do sleepovers. Sleepovers are a big no-no. We don't do sleepovers. You'll find most Haitian parents tell you, oh no, we're Haitian, we don't do sleepovers. And the reason being is because they're worried about what can happen at a sleepover. They don't have a lot of, eyes and kind of power over what happened. And also distrust of the system, the healthcare system, whether the healthcare system is providing them with good information and whether that information is going to be helpful. So you might, as a provider, you might get a lot of yes, 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 but then the client goes home and tries, herbal remedies or other remedies to address the problem. I found that a lot when it came to high blood pressure, which is huge, and diabetes in the community. So they would tell me, oh yeah, I was prescribed, my medication for hypertension, but I'm gonna try this tea first and see how it works, and then I'll try the medication. I was like, no, why don't we try the tea and the medication? That way you can keep it, lowered and not have any kind of bad outcomes. So once a family or a client feel that they can trust you or that you're working in their best interest, some of that distrust is, done away with. But it does take some work in earning that trust. So I wanted to cover cultural humility, which is, yes, I'm sorry.
What are any tips on how to earn the trust?
Oh, yes. So I will cover that as we do that here, yep. So cultural humility is one of the things that people are hearing about, and they're wondering, okay, I thought it was cultural competence, right? What is this humility business? So cultural humility talks about being open to learning about the individual client and the group that you're working with and not making assumptions. This morning, I've covered a lot about, Haitian culture and how, parents present and how folks can present. I want you to have it as an overview, but not as the definitive guide, this is how Haitians present. Because Haitians are coming in with different stories, with different experiences, and what you're seeing is one Haitian might present in that way, as I've discussed, others might not, depending on age, depending on access to education, and so on. So with a cultural humility, what we want to say is to be open-minded, to take the person at the individual kind of level. So it kind of involves putting away your preconceived outcome, what the interaction with the client is going to be, and what you hope to get out of the intervention. And I'll give you an example of that. So I have clients that have serious mental disorders, right? So the traditional course of action would be do an intake, diagnosis, hopefully help them to get on a medication to stabilize, and then work on whatever else. When I work with Haitian clients, I have to put that whole kind of intervention to the side, because most often than not, they will not take the medication or want to follow that. So I've had to kind of take a back seat into what I want the outcome to be and kind of let them and be their guide. So with one client that I'm working with right now, what we've done is we have this pact. I gave her, I think, 6 months to kind of work through certain goals and kind of be at a better place. But if that doesn't work out, then we discuss medication. Then we discuss other interventions. And she's felt empowered by it, and she's making great gains. And so far, medication's off the table for now because she's stabilized, but it's not completely. So that's one example of working in a cultural humility approach. Recognizing that the people that you're working with are very resourceful. If you can get from Haiti to Massachusetts, right, through maybe Brazil or Chile, you have to be pretty resourceful. You have to know how to navigate and get yourself there. So it's understanding that and kind of dealing with them and working with them from that position, that these people know what they need and how they can be better for themselves and for their families. The key elements that I have here is, what I've mentioned a bit is about, it's a lifelong process. And I know when everybody tells me, oh, this is, ongoing, I'm like, okay, can't we just, have a bullet point and just, move on with it? But it does need to be a longer process because everybody's different. When I was asked to do that work with Haitian agricultural workers, I'd never worked with agricultural workers. I did not understand what was involved. So what I did, I had to do a focus group with the folks in Maine. I went to Maine, we had a survey, and I was asking them all sorts of questions to understand their work, their life after work, what's the issues that they're grappling with so I can understand it. Even though they were fellow Haitians, I did not understand their experience as agricultural workers. So this lifelong process is just basically making yourself more open to understanding where that person is. Self-reflection and self-critique. I'm often accused of being an American, Haitian American, by other folks who may have just come from Haiti, or that my Creole sounds, too much Frenchicized, so on. So it's kind of taking a step and thinking about, am I using my Haitian American lens to see this person and to address this issue, and as opposed to kind of understanding where they're coming from. Partnership, just a real big, I'm glad that there's so many of you from these different sectors, and I can't stress enough the power in partnership. I have created this behavioral health collaborative to just partner with other mental health organizations so that our work and the resources that we share is spread out even more. And one of the hopes that I'm hoping the town at Acton is to work with each other among different sectors to kind of meet the needs of the new residents and new clients that are there. Yep, go ahead. So this is some of the ways that we can put some of what we've covered so much about cultural humility into practice. And one of the things that I kind of want to mention, and I've gone over a little bit, is to acknowledge our own limitations. And that's something that I try to do in my work and for those, and with those that I work with, is knowing that I don't know somebody else's experience, even though we may share the same culture, share the same language, and that I need to take kind of a step back. Listening without, making assumptions, fostering a respectful, partnership with individuals, and continuously kind of educating ourselves about, the different cultures and different ways that folks see things. I know that we have social service, education, police and fire here, and one of the things that I would love to see is kind of this integration with all these different sectors and trying to address the needs of the new migrants that were coming here. There have been stories about police being called on, for different shelters or for different reasons because there's been a lack of understanding what this person's doing. And I'll give you a brief story. When I worked at one of the schools in Cambridge, we had a bilingual program, and there were a lot of kids, from Haiti. So they would go out and throw rocks at ducks, right? In Haiti, that's not considered a bad thing, right? But here, when they were doing that, people would call the police on them because, these animals are protected and they should not be. But the child didn't understand that, what they're doing was wrong. So I'm hoping that when such a calls or such situations happen, that whatever the service, whether it's police, whether it's school, that we kind of, take a pause, take a little moment and say, okay, maybe this behavior is being seen because there's a lack of understanding and awareness of expectation. And I'm wondering, what can be done or how we can address this in future so that this person knows that that's not okay or that's not what's supposed to happen. Yes.
You're probably going to get to this, but I keep thinking about trauma-informed response to, immigrants and about ways that we can, I don't even know, help them feel welcome, help them feel accepted when
Right.
you don't have the language. I know that your posture and your body language and your face can say a lot, but I also know that it's a ton of trauma that people are walking through, and I'm very curious to hear maybe your top 3 ways to approach someone and help them feel safe and comfortable.
Right. One of the activities or program that I would like to see happen is as folks are settled into, a temporary shelter, an emergency shelter, that there's a coming together of group for those folks that are there to, ask them about, what their journey's been like, if they want to discuss it. Ask them what they would ideally, like to have access to and how that can be worked across other groups and social services to make that happen. That, I think, will go a long way and minimizing some of the trauma. It won't minimize it all because some folks are separated from the families, have husbands in other countries, family members in other countries that they're trying to, help. But what it says is that I want to learn or understand from you. I want to make you part of the decision making because all of us are here are helpers in some way, shape, or form. We want to help folks. We want to do the best that we can. But sometimes that can take the shape of we know best or we know better without including the voices of the folks that we're trying to serve. And, my public health background is into, community building and community input. So I often tend to go to the folks that I'm trying to work with and ask them, what do you want to do? What do you see as a possible, solution to what's going on?
Can I ask one more?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't want to get into politics because that's not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, you see in the headlines every day right now that different people groups are being targeted by Americans. And, we see that with the wall with Mexico, but I also am wondering how much you guys, busing someone from one state to another seems to me like saying, you're not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like just adds to that trauma. And I'm wondering how much of that is happening for people immigrating from Haiti.
Oh, that's always happened. I mean, in the early 80s, we were considered part of the triple H's when HIV came, and that had a stigma. It was hemophiliacs, and the term was homosexual at the time. And then Haitians was the third category, and that was by the CDC. So we've always kind of been, stigmatized, I'm sure as other groups says as well. But when you're trying to make a way and stabilize for it, you kind of push that kind of stuff to the back because your survival and your daily needs, your food, where am I going to get my child enrolled for school? How am I going to, meet rent? Kind of supersedes some of that, but it does act on you because you become more distrustful of folks. You don't go out into the community as much. So while it might not be at the forefront, it does impact behavior in terms of who's trusted and what recommendations get followed. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to touch upon each of the different sectors. I think when I spoke with you, you mentioned that there were going to be law enforcement schools. So I use those categories, and I know there's more other sectors there as well, but these are some of the major categories that some of the families might interface with. Designate officers, and it was great to see that some of the law enforcement folks had social workers and other folks there, which is wonderful. So that basically, checked off my first one. I've worked with many other communities and police programs where they've integrated with either the community health centers, with other social service providers to kind of be more integrated into the community, to let folks that they are potentially going to help know that they can be, helpful and they can be trusted. So the recommendation about collaborating with social service providers is one that I've seen, in communities like Brockton, Cambridge, and so on. And it's been, very successful in limiting some of the potential bad outcomes that can happen. Any questions about, I know law enforcement and folks from fire are there too. Any questions that you may have that, yeah?
Sure. So we talked about how resourceful they are getting here, which I think they should be very proud of themselves. We should be proud of them for coming. But have we ever talked about vocation and skills that they might be arriving with, and how we can support them with their skills, or if there's skills they would like to know, and how we can support them?
That is a great question. So the skill set is varied. I know folks who are like educators in Haiti who work, for different NGOs, nonprofit organizations, from folks who were, agricultural workers. So it depends on where the person is coming from. But what you'll find is that folks are open to wanting to learn, to wanting to do, any work, and that sometimes can lead to exploitation. But folks are, primarily in the service industry, a lot of hotel workers, nursing is a big one, home health aides that we found in Boston. There's a bunch of programs that train around medical assistant, home health aides, those kind of programs that require a certificate. And a lot in the nonprofit sector, interpreting, if they have the language skills, and so on. So it's varied across, many different sectors in terms of what the kind of skill sets they have. Yes?
Is there any type of orientation that's offered for the migrants that are coming to let them know kind of what the expectations are to limit the interactions or the problems they may face if they are interacting?
That is a great, I haven't heard, I've been pushing that, saying that if you're a shelter director or whoever's in charge of that, that be something that is scheduled and organized, and that is done, in a systematic way where, someone like you or someone from the police force would come and say, this is the kind of programs we have, this is what the expectation is. Because the folks that are coming in don't know the rules, right? Imagine if I drop you in Haiti or somewhere like that, you would not know what the rules and the cultural mores are. But if I were to tell you, okay, when you greet someone, usually, that was pre-COVID, we'd do 2 kisses on the cheek, but those kind of things, and how if someone offers you food in their home, you take it, even a little sip of water, that's a sign of showing, hospitality on their part, and you accepting that hospitality. Rejecting it would be kind of rejecting, that hospitality as well. So knowing those kind of things is very important, and I'm hoping, like you guys are doing today, that other folks do as well, and get information out and do those kind of workshops to kind of tell new residents about what the expectations are and prevent certain things, social service agencies, in my work with many of the agencies and relocation services, there's a lot of talk about, we need to meet the housing needs, mental health needs to take a back seat, or folks just need food and things like that. I write and ... because while those things are important, those things do impact mental health. And as I mentioned earlier, if you were used to having, a certain type of food or certain kind of routine, and all of a sudden you don't have access to that, you can't even do it, that will impact, this level of isolation. So I do recommend, if it's possible, in the shelter, to find a way to allow folks to cook their own food. If it's, partnering with, I know Boston has, local kitchens or something like that. If that can be arranged, or setting up like a schedule where, a group of folks can go and cook food and bring it back, something like that, so that people feel like they're still connected to, what they're used to, or they're feeding their family or having access to food that they feel is important. Because food is huge in our culture. When someone offers you, a piece of, bread or whatever, that to them is, extending hospitality, it's extending friendship. So while it might not seem as, food is food, it's more than that. There's a whole kind of emotional response that is tied to food, the presentation of it, how it's shared, and not having that can adversely impact folks. Building community, you'll find that many folks in the shelter may not, have blood relations, but have started to build community, making friends, folks that, they can count on. One of the biggest issues we're seeing is that in those temporary shelters, there are services coming in and coming out. There's not really a lot of coordination across, different kind of services. So folks are feeling overwhelmed and not getting to where they need to be. And I think it would be helpful to have some kind of a coordinating body. I think, Wanjiku, you mentioned 30 families potentially. It's not as big as some of the other parts of the state that are getting. It's still manageable, where there might be a kind of a coordinating body that is involved and know which services are needed, which client needs what, and link them to the right one, as opposed to a bunch of services coming in and then folks coming out and not knowing how to get in touch with certain providers. That's one of the biggest problems that we're finding now. And lastly, to incorporate families in decision-making. And I think I mentioned that as well. Getting their point of view, listening to what they have to say, because they know their own needs as well. Any questions with that one? Okay. Schools also have a lot of opportunity because like I said, school is well looked at and favored, and we see it as a pathway. So having a parent liaison, someone who can go out to the shelter to register students or talk to parents, as the officer had mentioned, inform parents what's the expectation is about school, that we don't just send them to school and don't connect with the school, and how do you present at school? Just a brief story. So when I worked for the school system, there, grandparents usually were with the kids and they'd send them off because the parents were usually off to work. So this grandparent packed the child's lunch, an apple was given to them, and they packed a knife, right, a cutting knife in the lunchbox, saying, because we don't usually bite into apple, we cut them up and slice, peel them too. So she didn't know that not, sending a knife to school was gonna get them in trouble. When the child opened the lunchbox and took out the knife, and then you can imagine what happened. But if we, had told that grandparent or informed them, oh no, you can't send a knife, to school, why don't you pre-slice it and send it that way, that could have avoided a lot of problems. English language learners programs for the student, also for the parents, if possible, would be helpful. Professional development for staff around dealing with such a diverse population, and what the expectations are of the parent, and in turn what the parent expects of you, and how you can work across those kind of expectations would be very helpful as well. We talked about building trust and relationship, and I think you asked, how do you do that? Quick funny story. I used to work in in-home therapy. So I'd go to someone's home, provide therapy and so on, and I worked with a Haitian family. I was there for months, and and I know the tradition of accepting food, but I also know the family was food insecure, right? So when she would offer me food, I said, oh no, thank you, I've eaten, so on and so forth. But there was always this guardedness. The information that I wanted to get, I would never, get. So one time I was with a mentor, which is someone who I was providing services to the child. And he went in and he, just accepted. I said, okay, I'll just accept as well too. So I accepted whatever dish she had that day. And after that, I got so much information, things that I had been trying to get for months. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, how could I have forgotten the whole food extension, and how food is viewed and how hospitality is viewed. And even though this parent was food insecure, by me not accepting her offering us food was making her feel a little bit distrustful of me, okay? So trust building, and just recently one of my colleagues told me they were working with a Spanish-speaking client. he came in, they routed him to the right resources and things like that. The next day he comes in, he brings a little chocolate bar in his pocket and extends it to the worker, right? So it's those kind of things, and by accepting it, you're kind of accepting and wanting, to build a relationship, to build trust. Level of trust is, kind of correlated with engagement and the type of information that is divulged. So in my example, because I hadn't built that level of trust for her to tell me everything that was sensitive enough, I wasn't getting that information. Engage parents, in the early assessment process. If you're in a school, a lot of things that a lot of times I'm finding the school may find an issue with learning delay or want to put in intervention and things like that, and disability is not something that is widely understood in our culture in terms of a child having a learning disability. Usually we phrase it as lazy, or this child is being difficult, a lot of other terms, as opposed to this child needs extra support. So the second bullet I put in is about engaging with clients and making sure that the person that is doing the translation interpretation understands educational terms and understand the educational system. Because many times, if you find someone who can just interpret Haitian Creole, they might not be interpreting what needs to be communicated. So there's a lot lost in translation. And I've had many a times been in special education meetings, and there's an interpreter there because I tend not to want to do it as I'm doing the presentation. And a lot of things are not well communicated with the parent, where I end up having to be the interpreter. So if you're working with parents where you have to do an intervention, where you have to put in any special programs, please make sure that the person that is, if the parent needs a translator, understands educational terms, and same with other sectors as well. Medical interpreters, I need certification. So if they are acting in that capacity, that person understand medical terminology, mental health terminology, and so on.
Sorry, back to the food for just a moment. Offering food or sharing a meal, does that build the same trust in revert? Like for us to build trust with them, if we're offering food, especially if it's Haitian, traditional Haitian food, does that help as well?
That can, but the most I found that builds a lot of trust is helping them address whatever problem they're presenting. So whether it's finding, a way to get job skills or addressing a particular issue, and there's a good outcome from that, that is kind of how you build trust too. I think some of the, yep, okay, we can go, through that. Next one, we are. With that. So the last few things I want to say again is to kind of build on the theme of being client-centered, understanding the individual and the client that is presenting to you in your program. Conduct informational sessions, and I think a few of you had already mentioned that as well too, is to inform the group or the population that you're working with about services and what the expectations are, and doing what we call in mental health, behavioral health care, a warm handoff, as opposed to say, oh, so-and-so's pantry is down the road, introducing them to so-and-so if possible, or giving them a name or somebody at that agency where they can ask for, and that could get them to the right place. I know that first bullet can be tough because there's not that many of us to be spread throughout the state, but when possible, to incorporate bilingual and bicultural staff, family liaison, mental health providers. Again, I think with the wide use of telehealth and virtual care, that is more, you can basically collaborate with an agency in Boston or elsewhere that has the language and cultural capacity and be an Acton. So there's ways to use technology to be able to meet, that first bullet. Outreach efforts, again, Radio, WhatsApp is another thing that is widely used. Everybody uses WhatsApp. So if you want to get your message out, that's a place too that can be used rather than spending your resources on translating a lot of material. Oral or verbal communication is best, in my opinion, because not a lot of people read Haitian Creole. I know I speak Haitian Creole fluently, but my reading level is not as great as my verbal skills. So when possible, I would tend to lean more towards verbal communication and sharing of information, short little video snippets, especially ones you can upload on WhatsApp or Facebook or something like that, as opposed to brochures with a lot of words and a lot of information. That's not gonna be very helpful. Any questions? I think that's the last one. That's it. We do have about 20 minutes left, yeah.
So where the shelter is located here is right on the highway, and then you have a whole neighborhood behind it. So if they want to walk anywhere, it's probably going to need to be through the neighborhood. Any recommendations you have for us on what we should share with the neighborhoods? Do people like to talk? Do they like to be talked to if they walk through the neighborhood, or any other advice for the people who live in the neighborhood behind it?
Yes, that's one of the kind of concerning issues and opportunity as well. I don't know if there are any kind of town meetings or how information is shared in this town, but I would start with sharing information about the population that's coming and how to, kind of be quote unquote a good neighbor, because most of the time it's neighbors who are seeing folks walking by or walking close to their properties and things like that that are calling law enforcement. What is this strange person doing here? And folks are used to walking and moving around, so it's kind of unrealistic to think that they would just stick to the shelter. So as much as possible, doing some outreach with the community and helping them to be aware of new residents would be helpful.
And would people be used to being addressed when they walk through the neighborhood, or best to not talk to the people, or?
It's, yeah, I think if someone wants to say hello or hi or whatever, I mean, that's fine. The residents also, need to be made aware of the layout. I'm not familiar with Acton, but I don't know if there's any access to buses or public transportation, because sometimes we found folks coming all the way from Attleboro to Boston, because we have an agency in Boston that helps a lot with immigration, with work permits and stuff like that. So they may need to be traveling back and forth, even within Acton, to get to certain services, I would imagine as well. Yes.
I'm just curious if you know, visa-wise, status-wise, what they're coming in with, because that's going to help social service people know what they can connect them to, what not.
Yeah, it's varied. Some folks have, documentation and passports or other identifiers. Others do not. Yeah.
So what about in public spaces like libraries and stuff? What do you think, how can we best help?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love libraries, you can tell. So I think libraries are like a wonderful place to start some of that. Information sharing, I think as the captain had mentioned, is have sessions with families, children reading time. If you can find any books, I can recommend some books. Yeah, in Haitian Creole, or also, in English and things like that for different age groups as well.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes.
You mentioned that all of the service providers can be overwhelming to the families and people coming in and out. But when I was at the Crawford shelter, I noticed many appeared to be shut down. And even, and they probably were overwhelmed, definitely, because there was so many people coming in and out.
Yeah.
However, it seemed hard to engage with them
Yeah. A lot of that's going to take time and building that relationship. When you went into the shelter, were there folks that spoke Haitian Creole or could speak to the families in their language? Or? Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 That's usually, the first few visits and the first few interactions, you're going to get that, especially since they don't know the person really well. And, as a group, we tend to be very guarded about information, what to share and what to say. So that, I think, is a natural response. You'll find a lot, yeah.
So along with that, what's the best way to be welcoming without being overwhelming, right? How can we, what do you recommend to achieve that balance?
Right. I would say consistency in whatever the staff that's going to be working with that shelter so that they start seeing the face and connecting it with the name, which is why I said if there was a coordinating body of, an agency that has 5 or 6 people that could work with those 30 folks and build the trust in the relationship, you can layer services on top of that. But they know, if I need such a service, I can go to Wanjiko, she will say to me, this person is trusted. Then if she says this person is trusted, I trust this person, right? As opposed to someone coming in, I'm from this agency, I want to help you. I don't know if I'm going to see you the next day, and what's usually happening is that the service provider does not go back in. If, it's short term and whatever the client needed was, addressed. But then there's usually other things that the client may need. So having a point person or people or a place that they know, okay, this agency or these people are helpful and I can go to them.
Are there any resources you can suggest if we have further questions about Haitian culture, reaching out to them, looking for translators? You're a fantastic resource, but I don't know if you want another 50 people saying, hey, I have another question for you.
Yeah. There's some agencies and some providers that are working. One of the biggest one is IFSI, that is in Mattapan. It's I always get the name wrong, Immigrant Family International Services, I believe, but I can provide you with that information. They've been kind of a hub, and they do have different offices throughout the state, but unfortunately none in Acton. They've been kind of the premier agency, but I know that their staff gets a lot of demand. I work with some community partners, as I mentioned, a collaborative, and we are open to, to helping. We just were meeting recently about how, we can reshape our work and agency to be more available. So would you like me to send that to you, some of that information, and you can share it? Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Knowing that part of the standard protocol is kind of having people go out to the drive-through where they're going to be staying on a regular basis, just control. How do we kind of share that with them, that it's not we're not there in a punitive way?
Right, right. I think what I've seen work is someone like you or a staff plain dress going in with an officer or someone like that, and having kind of an informational session, or having I know for certain neighborhoods they bring muffins or something, or a little trinket for the kids, whatever. So that kind of present that you are there to help, that these are the things that you would be called on, and that when you are called on, it's not automatically that you're in trouble, but trying to figure out what's going on and to be helpful. So if those messages are communicated early and folks are told what to expect and what may potentially happen, I think it will lead to a better response from them as well.
Can you share where these informational sessions taking place. I don't know if there's a community room at the Minuteman Inn. I'm imagining that taking them to the public safety facility for this informational session might not be the best option, but perhaps a church,
Yep.
a senior center that has a kitchen available and a large room for
Right.
the officers to talk to the new residents.
Exactly, yeah. A place, like the library is great. We use the library a lot. Like you mentioned, churches, community centers, places that are not gonna seem too institutionalized or anything like that. Places where, traditional community meetings would be held, would be helpful.
Just for those who've been asking questions, I'm not sure who knows this, but MOC, which is Making Opportunities Count, they're the ones who are running that shelter, the same ones in Concord. So they're the coordination, and they're the ones looking at the facility, what rooms they have, the rides that they need for different locations here in town. So they're the ones really sort of organizing a lot.
What are their names again?
Make opportunity count.
Make opportunity count, okay.
We love acronyms, so MOC.
Mock, okay, making opportunities count. Yeah, so it would be lovely if they were here and they could kind of talk and hear what you guys have been asking and what some of the information is, so that there could be better coordination with the town. And like you were mentioning about getting them to those meetings, the informational sessions, which I think is crucial, very important, would be one of the things that they could put on their agenda or schedule of things to do.
Debbie Warrenberg, First Connections. We've had the opportunity to be in the Concord shelter working with MOC, and I just wanted to say that I think initially, from a planning perspective, it's taking a very long time for them to just manage the very practical needs of those families. And they have one 12-passenger bus to do all of the transportation for like doctors, for everything. So if Acton was able to be a little bit more proactive about, hey, we're going to have this program and we're going to provide the transportation, it will be much more effective. We've been trying to, we're offering a new mothers group in the shelter, which is going very, very well, but took a long time to get off the ground. But we've tried to offer something in our play space because they don't really have any big meeting spaces. So we have this wonderful place they could come that's only 2 miles from the shelter. We cannot get that, cannot get that to work. So transportation is a big.
I can imagine,
We've
yeah.
given them free memberships to our museum too, and it's just very difficult for them to even get, we've been added to the group even, and we still have trouble getting them.
Can I share something?
Sure.
In Hudson, we have a partnership with the senior center. So they have a bus. They can pick it up at the hotel, bring it to the senior center to cook every other week. And then the open table is providing the ingredients for them to cook. They're very happy. They feel welcome.
Yes.
They are asking, can we come every week? Because it's so, so nice for them to spend the time together.
Yes.
And they prepare food for the entire people from the hotel. So I think they have 6 or 7 ladies that cook the entire afternoon. And then, like, with a partnership between, the Board of Health, the senior center, and the local food pantry, we make a huge difference. And also we have partnership with the bus company. They provide some cars. They can take the bus.
Yeah.
And they make a special stop at the hotel to drive them around the main points of the town.
This is just perfect. This is the kind of program collaboration and partnership that, I would love to see implemented, statewide. Because I think one agency cannot, not that I know that agency very well, and I know they're working very hard. And then there's a lot of, the other thing I wanted to cover real quick is compassion fatigue. Some of these clients are coming in with a lot of complex issues. Just recently, I have an intern who has a pregnant mom, like I mentioned, who has a 2-year-old and is about to give birth and has nowhere, to leave them. So there's a lot of these kind of issues going on. But if you see yourself as just one piece to a larger kind of resource and partner with folks and planning and doing that, I think, some of the wonderful things that you've just described can take place.
Yeah, and I'm working at the Hudson Shelter as a community health worker, so I noticed some of the patient speaks Portuguese.
Yes.
And then I connect them with a local Brazilian church in town, and the pastor get 2 vans to pick them up Sunday to bring to the services.
Yes.
And they are so happy, they are very welcome, they bring the children, they pray for the children, and the Brazilian church offers some Brazilian food for them, it's very similar to the Haitian food. So they feel so welcome, they are bringing other Haitian speak. They don't understand Portuguese, they don't understand. I don't know, they are there for the meals or for the environment, they feel so welcome. And I visited them last Sunday, and when I got in the church, they were so happy. They asked me to talk to the pastor about researching music in Haitian Creole to sing at the Thanksgiving service.
Yes.
And the pastor, of course, and then they were so happy that I was there because I connect them, and so they asked me to, do this connection too. And the person, oh, that's great. Of course, you can sing in Haitian Creole in the Thanksgiving service, of course.
Yeah.
And now they are so involved and this helped to, alleviate the distress.
Exactly. Yep. It's because it's all about connections and feeling welcome and making those type of, relationships. Again and again, you find that whenever someone is dealing with trauma, dealing, with, mental health issues, connection is huge and can help relieve some of those issues. Yeah.
Do you know Haitian Creole churches
I-
in the neighborhood?
Not in Acton.
I've tried to connect with one in Framingham. It's hard to
It's,
connect
yeah.
with and I haven't been able to connect it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can connect this group here with the Brazilian church, because I'm from Brazil, so I know some Brazilian church in Acton that can, welcome them, even if they don't speak Portuguese, but they can kind of welcome them and prepare some Brazilian food for them and make them feel welcome. And maybe they can have Haitian service,
Yeah. Because
Brazilian culture is very similar to the Haitian, and they are very connected. So I see that happening in Hudson, and it's kind of growing, and it's happening in a good way. I think it could happen the same way in Acton for sure. We can connect the Brazilian church with the Haitian and see if they will.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can send you some of the Haitian faith providers, faith-based community information. And I haven't been in communication with them lately, but they probably have ideas on how they can be more mobile, right? And travel from community to community and do something, like that, that may be helpful. So I can get you some of that information too. Yes.
You talked about the educational experiences tend to be private.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit more about what age children will start schooling, maybe what a typical classroom experience might look like for children in terms of is it a big class, small class, learning hands-on, or is it more rote memorizations?
Oh, so in Haiti, you mean how that was? Okay, so there's called La Jardinière, which if somebody speaks, French, it's usually like the pre-K kindergarten kind of experience where kids go to. So there's not a lot of preschool, attendance, but there is some of the kindergarten. And it is a lot of rote memorization and learning about, specific pieces of information and so on. So this type of learning that we do here in the US, where sometimes, you know, the children get to pick or be more involved, is not so much. It's more like more rigid in that way as well. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of, you know, corporal punishment used in the school when kids, you know, didn't act as they should or weren't as respectful. And the class sizes, you know, were fairly big. Yeah.
I'm the closer. Well, Mertice, that was a very great way to spend 2 hours, and thank you so much for sharing all your expertise and knowledge with the group. Can we have a round of applause for Mertice? So I think, you know, I'm proud to be here. I think that you watch the news across the state over the last year, and you hear people at public meetings screaming about, you know, the shelter in town and how horrible it is. And I think that in Acton and the areas and the communities around us, I think we view it very differently, and I'm proud to be working in a community like this. There's clearly a lot of interest in helping, and I think Wanjiko asked a good question, balancing helping with just letting them get used to being here and acclimate here. MOC, which Jen mentioned, thank you for mentioning, they are excellent. We've already had a meeting with them, a coordination meeting with the school district and local officials and state delegation. We expect them to do a great job and to work with us and all of you that want to help. And I think we also have a new resource in town, the AB Resource Center, which is run through the school district by United Way. And so we're set up to help. And I think our challenge, a challenge of people eager to help, is not helping more than they need help. And so I think we'll have to work on that together, but that's a good problem to have, and I'm proud to have that problem. So thank you again, Mertice, and thank you all for being here today. And we'll continue to have conversations as we help welcome these families and other people into our community in the coming weeks and months. So thank you all for coming.